Hello friends! Today we are talking all about cutting out our pieces for the Bloem quilt, and I'm just going to take you through the things that you'll need to have around you and how I personally go about cutting out this quilt and many of my quilts, give you a few handy tips for staying organized and making things easy. So the first thing you need obviously is your fabric. And I recommend having your fabrics pressed nicely, ready to cut. If you do like to pre-wash your fabrics, go ahead and do that. I don't usually pre-wash most of my fabrics, especially the Andover ones. But if you're using something you're not familiar with, you might want to pre-wash it to get any dye out or deal with any shrinkage. If you're using anything with linen in it, like a linen cotton blend, I also recommend pre-washing to account for any shrinkage. But usually I don't pre-wash. That's just me. But in any case, my fabric is nice and smooth. And then there are two different ways that you can cut out pieces for this. The first way would be to use a nice sharp rotary cutter. Change that blade, okay? Put in a nice sharp blade. That way you can cut like two at a time. So you can cut through two layers of fabric, which is really handy. And I would use this rotary if I'm using my templates. So these are the acrylic templates available for the Bloem quilt. A few different shops have them online, and they also are available at paperpieces.com. You can get them in both the medium and the large sizes. Okay, so the acrylic templates, I would use my rotary. I've also got these ones that I had custom made for me, so I'll be demoing with these ones. If you're just using the paper templates, you could still use this, but you'd be freehanding quite a bit. So I prefer, when I'm using paper templates, to just trace them using a regular marker or something like this Clover chalk marker that has a little roller, and the chalk comes out and makes a mark. So I would use these to trace around my paper pieces and then cut with some really nice sharp shears, like these Midnight 8-inch LDH scissors. Okay, so sharp scissors are always good to have in your studio. You will also want to have some nice straight quilting rulers. These ones I've had forever, probably since I started quilting. This one's 6 by 12 and this one is 6 by 24. These come in handy for cutting all the half square triangles and slicing strips, okay? So that's one of my tricks, is that I like to slice strips from full width fabrics and then take those strips and cut out my subsections from there. It makes it a little bit easier to manage. And then of course I've got my cutting chart. So here's the whole chart for Bloem 1, which is the one that I'm making. And I've got these colors here are the phosphor colors, but I'm using the atomic colors. So I printed out a little key so I wouldn't get confused. So I know which is my fabric 1 all the way to my background color. And I just cut one color at a time and I check it off as I go. So I know that I've done each row. So that's the way I like to do it. And this has taken me a couple days to cut. So I'll spend an hour or two cutting fabrics, take a break, come back to it, do a little bit more. And that's the way I like to manage it. So with this is the background fabric, and you can see I need to cut 24 small squares that are 4 7/8 of an inch. I could also cut them at 5 inches and then trim the half square triangles down after I've put them together. But I need 24 of these. And then here for these little outer curves, I need 32 of those. So in most of these cases, other than these little orange peels, the orange peels, you don't necessarily need to cut strips, but you could. But I like to cut a strip of fabric. So let's use this as an example. Here's my little outer curve. I'm just going to measure it to double check, but I think this should be 4.5 inches. It is, it's 4.5 inches. So then what I can do is cut a strip that's 4.5 inches wide. And then from that strip, I'll be able to cut out a bunch of those little curves, okay? I'm just gonna show you a little demo on how to cut pieces out of these strips. Okay, so these are the little outer pieces. These ones that I'm cutting, I've checked, they're 4.5 inches wide, so I've cut a strip that's 4.5 inches wide, okay? Always double check the width of the pieces that you're cutting before you go and slice a strip, all right? Especially because when you look at something like this, these squares, like this square, is not 4.5 inches. It needs to start at 4 7/8 of an inch. You could even cut it as a 5-inch strip. And then once you've cut out your squares, you slice diagonally once to make your half square triangles. So that looks something like this, where I've got 2 of these. So I started out by just cutting squares. That's 4 7/8 of an inch. Slice diagonally. I've got my triangles now. And when I put these back together, they will measure 4.5 inches once they're as a half square triangle unit, okay? Now, if you cut it 5 inches, when you put these together, you sew them together, then measure, you might need to trim down to 4.5 inches, but it's always better to have a little bit of wiggle room. So if you want to cut your strips a little bigger, like at 5 inches, and for these larger squares, 9 inches, or if you're doing the medium, it would be 6 7/8 and 3 7/8, or you can round up to 7 inches and 4 inches, okay? But if you're doing the large quilt, that's the measurement on the top. All right, okay, so I've got my strip. It's folded in half. So I'm doing 2 at a time. I've got this guy here. I'm gonna do, I never want to cut towards myself. I never want to cut in a really awkward way when I'm using a rotary cutter. These blades are super sharp, they're razor sharp, so you always need to be really careful about how you're cutting. And if you're new to rotary cutters, I insist that every single time you set this down, you lock your blade. Just get used to it, it becomes second nature. Okay, that's for safety for you and anyone else around you. Okay, all right, so I'm opening this up. I've got this lined up. Going to do this very carefully. My blade is nice and sharp, so I shouldn't have to push down too hard. There's my piece there. 2 pieces. The next one will go like this. You're gonna get it, just be aware of where you've sliced. Get it like this. Now, this is scrap. Unfortunately, there's no way around it with these funny pieces. You'll end up with these extra little bits, but save them. You could always use them in another project. You could applique them and make a cute little floral thing, but don't throw these away, okay? They're handy little scraps to have around. So again, I'm just adjusting my fabric so that I can slice away from myself. Take this, turn it around this way. And there you have it, okay? And you just continue on through the strip, count up your pieces, make sure you have enough on here, check it off when you're done, and that's it. Strips really helps to keep things manageable so that you're not taking a big piece of fabric and trying to cut little pieces out of it. So I recommend the strip method. If I'm using papers, then I could put this down and then I could trace all the pieces that I need to. And because it's folded in half, because I folded it selvage to selvage, I can do 2 at a time, which makes quick work. And then once I have all my pieces cut out from one fabric, so here's fabric, this is fabric 13 or the background, I put them on paper plates. Let me show you. So here are all my pieces I have cut out. I use paper plates. I write down fabric 1, fabric 2. All the shapes, the different shapes in each fabric color are just stacked here. So when I'm building my actual blocks, I can, I need fabric 1, I need fabric 4, there's fabric 4, and it makes it very easy and portable, right? Like look at that, it's all stacked together. So if I don't have a dedicated sewing space, many of us sew on our dining tables. Sometimes we need to feed people at those tables, or we need to clear off the table. You can just pick it up, take it away, okay? And then the little bonus is that when you finish when you finish a fabric, when you clear a plate, I like to put snacks on there. So it becomes a little reward for myself for all my work. Okay, so that's just a little tip. You don't have to use paper plates, but then you can reuse them for more and more projects because you're just always using fabrics 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're not wasteful. They're not like plastic bags where the baggies tend to slide all over the place. I just really like this method, okay? All right, so that's it. Really, you just need your nice sharp cutting tools, your chart for what you need to cut out, and some sort of templates, whether it's the paper ones that are included in the pattern or your acrylic ones. The awesome thing about these acrylics is that, and they are named after La Fin du Monde, that's another quilt pattern of mine, and these acrylics work for both the Bloem quilt and La Fin du Monde, which is a beautiful heart pattern. So you get lots of different projects out of this one set. All right, and that's it. Some good rulers, and you're ready to go, okay? So good luck cutting. If you've got any questions, post them in this post, and good luck. I'll see you next week for the next step. You got this.